Alrighty. So, I'm going to say this. Jose Aldo deserved it better. He deserved a better send-off. He deserved just better from the company. Now, obviously, the fans applauded him, and I think that's what matters. Kind of like my favorite OG fighter that got me into the sport, Tony Ferguson. Despite on his losing streak, us fans loved seeing him come out time after time after time. So, you know what? Jose Aldo has the moral victory here because the fans are definitely on his side. He didn't have to come back and go down to bantamweight. He didn't have to come back and continue fighting for us. He didn't have to. He could have just rode off into the sunset. And, you know, it's like, oh, did he go in and did he get a paycheck? Yeah. But he's Jose Aldo, the OG dude at featherweight that didn't have to fight. He could have gotten a brand deal on his social media and lived off all that sponsorship money if he wanted to. The guy has nothing left to conceivably prove in the sport, but he came back in a time where we need big names on these cards to keep things afloat. Because let's face it, these UFC pay-per-view cards are not as stacked as they could be. Some of them are really good still, but some of them are very bland. In UFC 315, okay, Valentina Shevchenko versus Manon Fiorot was, you know, one of the fights I was looking forward to. Those were some two names because women's flyweight, to be honest, is probably my favorite women's division. I know that it's controversial online to say that you like the women's divisions for some reason. I really have no problem with them for the most part. You know, they're just not going to hit as hard as the guys, and that's okay. But, like, other than that, the card didn't have as much going for it publicity-wise as I thought. And, you know, I saw this chart where they talked about a lot of these unsold seats. I don't know the legitimacy of it, but when I saw it, I had a feeling that it could be true. Just because I think a lot of people aren't buying expensive tickets anymore. People aren't really buying for pay-per-views anymore. They'd rather go to a restaurant and go, you know, do all that. But moving forward, I do want to say that, you know, the UFC is not doing its veterans right when they do people like Jose Aldo like this. Because honestly, I felt like Aldo did win that fight. I felt like I just felt like he was, you know, there's a YouTube comment that I want to quote. I didn't come up with this thought myself, but when I read it, it was facts. Anthony Smith had a better send-off than Jose Aldo. Now, I'm not an Anthony Smith hater like a lot of the internet is. I like what he's done for the sport. I know his flaws are out there. But Jose Aldo has objectively done way more for the sport, longer for the sport, than Anthony Smith ever has. Always coming back, and the audience loved him. But it just seemed like Dana and the UFC just go, man, go. After all the years they spend. And this sets a precedent for future fighters coming into the UFC. Now Ilya Topuria doesn't seem so crazy when he says he wants to retire young. Because when you're one of these OG veterans who keeps coming back to be on the main card but not the main event, right? Just so there's big names on these cards because these cards are somewhat lacking now, like I said. You go with that sacrifice because Jose Aldo did not need to be in that cage all those times. He could have stayed retired. Just saying. But that's the thanks you get for continuing to put your health on the line. And you know what? He was talking about how the weight cut just wasn't working like he thought it was. You know, he said he just doesn't have it in him anymore to keep up with all this. That shows that he has definitely run himself down to zero tread left in the tires now, and it's time. And this is really the thanks that the UFC kind of gave him as that send-off. Now, look, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. He's in the Hall of Fame. He was a champion for a long time, and he's definitely going to be recognized by the UFC and the sport all the time. But I just feel like this send-off was super disrespectful to an older veteran. And now these newer fighters coming in, what's the incentive for them to stick around and be these long-time dominant champions now? If they see that with Jose Aldo, what's going to make them want to come back? Because it's really, the thing about it is it is sad to see these fighters have long careers only to be forgotten, because it's hard to keep these big names who show a lot of promise now. Like these new stars like Ilya Taporia, who you could see staying around in a long time, but then they retire as soon as they reach the pinnacle of the sport. And you think, why? And now you're starting to see it. I would actually like to see Ilya Taporia be a very dominant champion in 2 divisions. If he's able to get that fight, if he beats Charles and beats Islam, I would love for him to stay and be one of those dominant champions just for the sport, to keep it afloat, keep more eyeballs on it, right? Because we need those guys. But the incentive to stick around a long time. Now you could see why Henry Cejudo stopped at the top when he did. Like all these guys who are leaving early now, I'm just saying, when we keep going through fighters like this, new star after new star, that's what I call like part of the Conor McGregor effect, how we were so dependent on like guys like Conor McGregor and John Jones and Anderson Silva to be the big stars. But once they retire, you have to find a new one, and you keep going through one because the next one wants to retire. It's now this vicious cycle. And it's not the end-all, be-all, but do you think the way they're treating Jose Aldo on the way out is going to incentivize people to stick around? Or is it going to get them to, okay, get in, get a couple dominant finishes, show a lot of promise, and right as you have the audience in the palm of your hand, hey guys, I'm retiring, because I've seen how the UFC is treating these older veterans. I don't want to be in those shoes. That's the road I feel like we're going down. Yeah, no, you know what? So, Jose Aldo, I know that he's been recognized quite a bit. But I think that the UFC should be kissing his boots on the way out for as much time as he has spent in the sport of mixed martial arts. He's not the only one who's been disrespected like this. But this is the path that this is going to lead down. And I know I like to say more positive things right now, but I can't keep being in denial and keep putting on a fake happy face when there's obviously some cracks in the UFC now that, used to not be there, but are now starting to show, and I could see where the future of the sport is kind of heading. And we need to incentivize fighters to want to be like Jose Aldo and stick around for a while, even after they lose the belt. But stuff like this is going to make it so that doesn't happen. But that's what I got to say. I'm done talking your ear off. Peace out, and happy UFC pay-per-view.